Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Lockett and I am the owner of The Healthful Human. Today I'm going to be discussing with you the link between nutrition and mental health. So huge thank you to Dr. K for having me in. This is a huge passion of mine. Just to explain a little bit more about my background, I am a nutritionist. I graduated from the University of Bridgeport with a master's degree in human nutrition. So I've been studying this for 3 years professionally, in the upper education, and then I've been doing just nutrition work for the last year or so. So this is a huge passion of mine, and it's something I'm very excited to share with you all. So I kind of want to explain what the lecture is going to be about, and then I'll just go straight into it. So this lecture is going to be focused on how nutrition affects mental health in a lot of different ways, the importance of eating a well-rounded diet, the importance of supporting those neurotransmitters that are so linked to our mental health, and then the importance of how things like diets and dietary habits can also impact our mental health as well. The first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to discuss a little bit of basic nutrition with you all. So this is something I like to do whenever I do a lecture or a workshop. I like to go into basic nutrition just a little bit. It helps to establish a base for anyone who's not very familiar with basic nutrition terms or concepts, and gives you a good background, a foundational background to start with. So let's get started. The first thing I want to discuss with you is macronutrients. So there are two types of nutrients that the body needs. Now, all of these nutrients are provided from food, and there are two types. There's macronutrients and there's micronutrients. Now, macronutrients you're probably very familiar with. Those are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And I'll explain a little bit about what each of those does in the body. So carbohydrates are the primary source of energy for the body. They're almost, I wouldn't say the default source of energy. They're not the only source, but the body does prefer to utilize carbohydrates for energy. Now, carbohydrates are also known as sugars. So if somebody says carbohydrates, sugars, carbohydrates, it is the same thing. There are different types of sugars, different types of carbohydrates, and they do break down differently in the body, but ultimately they all end up as ATP, which is a form of energy that our cells use. Now, if we don't have a lot of carbohydrates, the body can revert to using fats for energy. So fats are not just used for energy, they are used for other things such as the outside of our cells. They're used to produce hormones, all that kind of stuff. So they are very, very essential outside of just energy. But essentially, if we don't have enough carbohydrates, the body can use fats. Now, once again, there are different kinds of fats. So there are saturated fatty acids, monounsaturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fats. So, fats break down into these fatty acids that have different structures, different functions. When we eat these, if, the body needs, it can turn it into that ATP, which is our fuel. Now, the third type of fuel that plays so much of an important role, that's not just fuel, but this is proteins. So proteins are broken down into amino acids. Now, proteins are the base for everything in the body: nails, skin, hair, hormones, they are the beginning of neurotransmitters. So, proteins are, in my opinion, probably the most important macronutrient, just because of the crucial role that they play in everything in our metabolism. So there are two types of proteins, essential and non-essential. Essential means that we need to get them in the diet. Non-essential means that we can produce them in the body even if we don't necessarily eat them in the diet. But essentially, a well-rounded diet will provide all of these amino acids. And they're used for a lot of body processes. And at the end of the day, if we're not eating enough carbohydrates or fats, the body will revert to using protein for fuel. It's not preferred, but it does happen. So all three of these are very important macronutrients that can provide the body with energy as well as structure, other functions. Now, the second category is micronutrients. Micronutrients, as the name implies, smaller, micro. These are minerals and vitamins. So when we talk about vitamins and minerals, the important thing to know is that the body cannot in any way create these things. So as I mentioned, even though the body can produce fuel from different types of fuel types, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, the body cannot synthesize vitamins and minerals. So they are absolutely crucial to get in the diet every single day. There's two types of vitamins. So there are water-soluble vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins. They differ in their absorption. And as you can imagine, fat-soluble vitamins do require fats. They are stored differently than water-soluble vitamins, which are actually, expelled from the body into high amounts. So And the water-soluble vitamins include all the B vitamins, as well as vitamin C. Now that's going to be B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B7, B9, and B12. And then we have vitamin C, which everybody's familiar with. And then we also have our fat-soluble vitamins, which are vitamins A, D, E, and K. So, and this also includes the vitamin A precursors, which are called carotenoids. So, vitamins play super important roles as coenzymes. They are necessary for metabolic processes to move forward. And they function as antioxidants. They have a lot of different roles in the body that are so important. With minerals, it's a very similar situation. So minerals are used to support our metabolism. They do have different roles, coenzymes, electrolytes. And the major minerals are going to be, sodium, potassium, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium. We need all these minerals, for the body to function, fluid balance, all that good stuff. So as I, kind of explained, these things are absolutely necessary from a well-rounded diet because the body can't synthesize them. And that is, where the root importance of a very well-rounded, nutrient-dense diet comes from. Now, one last thing I want to mention is just water. I do consider it, a nutrient a lot of nutritionists do because it's absolutely crucial for the human body, something that we do need to take in every day. The human body is like 60% water, so it helps with. I don't want to say it helps. It's necessary for human life. So, as I mentioned, you can get all of these nutrients from a very well-rounded diet. Now, what is a well-rounded diet? Where do we get most of these nutrients from? Well, we get a lot of these nutrients from whole foods. So you're probably aware of the term whole foods or processed foods. Whole foods are just foods that are as close to their natural form as possible. This means that they haven't necessarily been processed down. Some of them have been processed to some extent to make them edible, to make them safe for consumption, such as milk, cheese, eggs, that kind of stuff. Oils are processed. However, we can, count them as processed foods as whole foods because they are part of a very well-rounded diet. So we're talking about whole grains, fruits, vegetables, legumes, meat, dairy, certain oils, fish, poultry. These are all whole foods that the body can use, can take nutrients from and use it for our metabolism. So and a lot of these whole foods, as you can imagine, fruits and vegetables, very high in nutrients. We call those nutrient dense, meaning that they have a lot of nutrients. And when you are eating all of these nutrients, your body is going to function the way that it needs to function. It's going to be able to support your physical and mental health. And you're going to be eating to fuel yourself as well as eating to, support this very well-oiled machine that we call the human body. All right, so now let's begin to talk about the link between nutrition and mental health. So the biggest link, the most baseline link when we're talking about biology is we want to talk about neurotransmitters. So if you can recall back to biology class, perhaps, depending on how long ago it's been, but in biology class, you probably learned about neurotransmitters, these compounds that are crucial for a lot of different body processes. So they play a role in everything from mood, body temperature, heart, the rate that our heart, races. They are so important for so many different body processes, and they also play a role in our mental health. So we're going to discuss 3 very important neurotransmitters: serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. And I'm going to discuss kind of what the role is in the body, how these, neurotransmitters play a role in mental health, and then the pathway. And what I mean by the pathway is how we get from point A to the creation, to point B, the creation of this neurotransmitter, and how vitamins, minerals, other little things kind of play a role in how we get to that. And if we're not, if we don't have these vitamins, minerals, if we don't have point A, we can't get to point B. If we don't have the bridge from point A to point B, we can't get across, those kind of things. So let's talk about serotonin first. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter that plays a role in body temperature, sleep, mood, appetite, the way you feel pain, and it has been linked to certain mental conditions such as depression, aggressiveness, certain impulsive behaviors. So when the body needs to produce serotonin, which it does, we are going to start with an amino acid. Now recall, I did discuss proteins, our sources of amino acids. So we're going to discuss an amino acid here called tryptophan. Now tryptophan is the beginning of the pathway for the creation of serotonin. So tryptophan needs a compound called BH4. Now, once it uses that compound, it can become another compound called 5-HTP. 5-HTP is the compound that comes before serotonin. Now, to get from 5-HTP to serotonin, we need vitamin B6. So as you can see, we need two different, compounds, two different, things to get from tryptophan to serotonin. We're going to need BH4, which can be produced from B vitamins, and then we're going to need vitamin B6. So as you can see, we already are, showing the importance that if we don't have these few little puzzle pieces to get from, tryptophan to serotonin, we're not going to be able to produce this incredibly important neurotransmitter that plays such a huge role in our mental health, right? And then in addition, the body does need to break down these compounds as well or move them into another pathway. So in order for serotonin to move into the next part of the pathway, we do need vitamin B2 and copper. So already here as part of the serotonin pathway, we need 4 different, crucial elements, crucial puzzle pieces. And that's kind of how all of the pathways go. So let's move into dopamine and you can kind of see how that one functions next. So the good thing about dopamine and norepinephrine is that they are actually part of the same pathway. So dopamine does turn into norepinephrine, but we'll get there in just a second. So dopamine plays a huge role in movement, posture, mood, and even dependency. So when we're talking about, mental health, we're talking about addiction disorders, we're talking about mood disorders. And in this case, we're not going to start with tryptophan like we did with serotonin. We're actually going to start with an amino acid called tyrosine. Now, tyrosine also needs BH4 to move forward in the pathway. Tyrosine, using BH4, is going to become dihydroxyphenylalanine, which is the compound before dopamine. So to get from dihydroxyphenylalanine, we're going to need, once again, vitamin B6. So we're going to go from, dihydroxyphenylalanine to dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that plays, such a huge role in all these things. And you're noticing again, BH4 was needed for serotonin and B6 was needed for serotonin. So here becomes the important thing of why are you wanting to eat a well-rounded diet, because you want to provide the body with enough of these vitamins and minerals that it can do everything it needs, not just one thing, not just, nitpicking, it's going to need it for a lot of different things. So we get to dopamine. Now we have dopamine, right? That dopamine can also become the next neurotransmitter that is incredibly important as well. Now that's going to be norepinephrine. Norepinephrine plays a role in attention, learning, sleeping, dreaming, emotions, and also blood vessel contraction and heart rate. So norepinephrine actually becomes epinephrine, which is adrenaline, part of our fight or flight response, right? So to get, and when we talk about mental health, norepinephrine is linked to mood disorders. So to get from dopamine to norepinephrine, we need vitamin C and copper. So very similar to how we needed in the serotonin pathway, B2 and copper, now we need vitamin C and copper. And then to get from norepinephrine to epinephrine, we need another compound. So how do these neurotransmitters, play a role in our mental health? And why are they so important in mental health? So low levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, can cause, have been linked to things like anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, fatigue. We also have, imbalances in these neurotransmitters that have been linked to other conditions such as ADHD, schizophrenia. And when we take, anxiety and depression medication, that is exactly what these medications are targeting. They are targeting levels of dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, to try and balance them so that your mental health can be, healed, using these medications. Now, obviously not everybody chooses to use medications, and that's okay. It's okay to choose them. It's also okay to not choose them. And I'm sure Dr. K, has explained this in a lecture, or, maybe somebody else has explained this, but essentially, if you do choose to use medications, you should just know that these medications do target the neurotransmitters to balance those things out. So, as you can see, it's very important that we have, that we have a diet that supports the production of these in a way that the body needs to maintain that balance, so that we can have, a very functioning, supported, brain that needs all these neurotransmitters that can support all of our metabolism. So, so let's discuss some important nutrients. When we discuss these important nutrients, what we're really discussing is how do imbalances in these nutrients affect mental, conditions such as depression and anxiety. We've already seen the link between these neurotransmitters and these mental illnesses, these mental conditions, but now we're going to discuss how it is so important to get all those nutrients so that that you don't have those imbalances and what can happen. As I kind of explained in the pathways, what you want to kind of imagine is getting from point A to point B to point C, right? And let's imagine all these, point A, point B, point C, as cliffs. You're on the top of the cliff. The only way to get from point A to point B is with a bridge. The only way to get from point B to point C is with a bridge. These bridges are like vitamins and minerals. They're nutrients. We can't get from point A to point B unless we have this bridge, unless we have this thing to take us from, from one place to the next. If the bridge is missing, if there's not enough of the bridge, if the bridge is broken, if there's not enough to support it, we're not going to be able to get from point A to point B. So when you're missing, that bridge, or when you don't have enough of that bridge, those nutrients, you're not going to be able to produce the neurotransmitters that are so important to your mental health. And it's not just neurotransmitters. This is how nutrition functions all over the body. In order to produce enzymes, hormones, everything we need in order to create cells, it needs all these building blocks, these puzzle pieces, these bridges, to get from point A to point B in our metabolism. And so when you don't have enough of these nutrients, when you're not providing your body with a well-rounded diet, you're going to have a hard time producing what you need to produce to have, a very supported mental and physical health. Now, let's discuss kind of more in terms of how can we, support ourselves, what nutrients we need to support our overall well-being and as well as our overall, mental health through supporting these neurotransmitter productions. So when we talk about, what nutrients are very important for each of these neurotransmitters, let's review the pathways one more time. So what nutrients are necessary for serotonin metabolism? Well, we're looking at tryptophan, BH4, B6, B2, copper. Tryptophan is needed to start the pathway. BH4 is needed to turn tryptophan into 5-HTP. B6 is needed to turn 5-HTP into serotonin. And then serotonin is broken down only with B2 and copper. And then when we go into dopamine, we see, we need tyrosine, BH4, B6, copper, vitamin C. So you start with tyrosine. BH4 is needed to turn tyrosine into the next compound, dihydroxyphenylalanine. That can become dopamine with vitamin C. With B6. Now, when you go from dopamine to norepinephrine, because you need both of these, we're looking at vitamin C and copper. And then to break down that norepinephrine, we need a molecule called SAMe. So how can you get more of these nutrients into your diet? If we know we need tryptophan, we know we need certain amino acids, we need certain B vitamins, which of the foods that we eat are going to provide us with these? Because we don't need to supplement. We don't need to just fill our bodies with all these empty nutrients and supplements and stuff like that. We can get these through a very well-rounded diet. And in most cases, most people are able to eat these foods, absorb these nutrients properly, and support their body through a very full nutrient dense diet. So what are some sources of tryptophan? And just to note, this is actually the part of the lecture you might want to refer back to when you're working on your workbook, because I do ask, as a kind of an activity to see how we can get more of these foods into the diet, which foods provide these. So tryptophan and tyrosine are both, like I said, amino acids, and they both have pretty much very similar sources. So it's going to be salmon, you're going to be looking at poultry, eggs, dairy products, nuts, and seeds. Now, one thing I want to note about amino acids and proteins is that a lot of plant compounds don't contain all of the essential amino acids. However, most animal products, I believe all of them, do contain all of the essential amino acids. So when you're eating a vegan diet, the one thing you want to pay attention to especially is nutrient deficiencies and making sure that you're getting all of your amino acids that the body needs. This means eating a very well-rounded diet of different types of plant proteins. So we got our tryptophan, our tyrosine, and then vitamin C. Of course, everybody's familiar with oranges. Drink a big glass of orange juice if you need vitamin C. Might be interested to know that broccoli actually has more vitamin C than oranges do. So we're looking at broccoli, leafy greens, citrus fruits, berries, peppers. This whole wide range of colors and flavors can provide us with the vitamin C that we need. How about vitamin B2? So like I said, a lot of the B vitamins are going to be found once again in animal products, but they can also be found in certain vegetables, starchy, proteins, plant-based proteins as well. So for vitamin B2, we're looking at beef, fish, milk, nuts, eggs, and like I said, nuts is probably the only plant-based, source that has a good source of B2, but you can always, round out your diet, get more of the plant proteins to be able to fill in those gaps as well. Vitamin B6, we're looking at potatoes, starchy vegetables, beef, poultry. So once again, we have some, plant-based options there as well. And then for vitamin B9, we have leafy greens, whole grains, beans, legumes. So B9, a lot of plant-based sources as well. And as you can see, the importance of, once again, that balance, that well-rounded diet where you're eating enough animal products if you eat animal products, but you're also eating plant-based sources. And if you're eating only plant-based sources, you're making sure to get a wide range of those to fill all of your nutrient needs. So let's kind of put this all together and see how we can, support our mental health through our diet. And how we can make sure that if we do have these mental health conditions, we're doing the best that we can on our end to provide our body with everything it needs to support the production of those important neurotransmitters. So the important thing to understand is that the nutrient needs of individuals vary greatly. Everybody has different individual nutrient needs. For the most part, a healthy population is going to have very similar needs. However, there are conditions, pregnancy, lactation, if you have certain conditions, depending on your age, your gender, everything like that can affect your nutrient needs. So when we talk about a well-rounded diet, which I've mentioned, a lot of times in the lecture so far, but what does that mean? That means any diet that's going to provide you with the nutrients that your body needs to support a healthy metabolism. So for some people, that means, they're omnivores. Some people are vegans. Some people, do vegetarian. People find different ways to fulfill their nutrient needs. And it just varies by individual. And so we're not going to judge people based on their dietary choices because what works for you may not work for someone else. Emotionally, financially, situationally, like everybody has different things that impact the way they eat and what they can do nutritionally. And that all has to be taken into account when we talk about a diet. Now, I could do a whole nother lecture on, food privilege and things like that and how, different things affect the way that different people can eat, how food deserts affect how, nutrient imbalances in low-income communities, those kind of things. But we don't need to talk about that now because we're talking about, mental health, but just know that there are a lot of different factors that go into supporting our body through nutrition. So what happens is if you fill your plate with overly processed foods, and I'm not saying that you can never have a processed food or anything like that. We're not talking about restriction. We're not talking about cutting things out. We're just talking about prioritizing. So if you're prioritizing processed foods, remember that these processed foods have had a lot of the nutrients processed out of them. So when you're eating primarily processed foods, you're not getting the nutrients that your body needs. You're placing yourself at risk for these nutrient deficiencies, these nutrient imbalances. And imbalances goes both ways, right? It can mean a deficiency or it can mean too much. So what we're talking about is we're filling our plate with whole foods in order to get most of the nutrients that we need. And then we're filling in the gaps to fill ourselves with foods maybe that we like and maybe that we enjoy. Times to have social eating. You go to a birthday party, you have a cupcake. We're talking about eating primarily a diet, a well-rounded diet full of whole foods to get all the nutrients you need, and then enjoying the other things in moderation to support maybe your mental health, in other ways. So if you fill your plate with those nutrient-dense foods, you're going to notice that you are supporting your overall metabolism as well as your mental and physical health. Another thing we want to talk about as well is, how food relationships affect our mental health, right? Because the very baseline biology of nutrition is that you put the puzzle pieces in and things, come out. You put the cogs and the machine is well oiled and it works. However, there's an emotional, a relationship aspect to food as well that is so important. And how does that relate to nutrition? Well, when we talk about diets, when we talk about fad dieting, when we talk about weight loss obsession, when we talk about diet culture, we're talking about a culture that promotes weight loss above anything else without thinking of the importance of building a healthy relationship with food emotionally. So what happens on fad diets, first of all, is that when we promote weight loss through fad diets, first of all, we're prioritizing weight. We're prioritizing the physical aspect of it without thinking of how, a diet should support everything else as well. And what happens is a lot of people who go on diets for weight loss, they don't maintain the weight loss anyway. Why is this? Because you're using these habits that are not sustainable. They're not long-term. They make you miserable, and they focus on one thing only, and that's the way you look physically, rather than how you feel emotionally, how you feel physically. And a lot of these diets are restrictive. What happens with overly restrictive diets is that it can lead to these very unhealthy relationships with food. It can lead to food guilt, food shame. You eat one thing you told you're not supposed to eat, and all of a sudden you feel awful, and you don't have this good relationship with food where you view it as a fuel, as this thing that nourishes your body. Instead, you view it as just this very baseline good or bad mentality, and that's not good. That is incredibly harmful. It can lead to disordered eating. These eating behaviors that are just very hard to fix, over a long period of time. So talking about the relationship of nutrition and mental health, we also want to consider this aspect of what is your relationship with food? Do you use it to nourish you emotionally and physically, or are you having a hard time with it? Are you scared of it? Are you miserable because of it? All of these things are important. And I just want to note that when we talk about weight loss, ultimately, it all boils down to calories in, calories out. Now, that's a very simplified, oversimplification of it. However, that is exactly what weight loss is. If you are in a calorie deficit, you will lose weight. So for the most part, most people who are in a calorie deficit are losing weight. If you're eating too much, you're going to gain weight. Now, does that mean that people who are, who are incredibly fit are, in a calorie deficit all the time? Well, they may be eating 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 calories a day to maintain that muscle mass and stuff. So it's not all about just eating less calories or eating 1,200 calories. It's about eating the calories that your body needs to provide those nutrients. So what happens sometimes as well with restriction, especially in women, is that we restrict so much that we drop to a point where our body is not getting the nutrients it needs. We start to lose our periods. We start to lose our hair. Our body starts to break down because we're not giving it the food we need because we're so scared of gaining weight. So a big part of nutrition and mental health is also nurturing your relationship with food, how it affects your body, how your mental health is affected by how you feel about food as well. So now let's put everything together and talk about kind of what you can do to improve your mental health with your nutrition. So all the key points we talked about today in this lecture, we talked about basic nutrition. We talked about neurotransmitters, how they function. We talked about how we need nutrients for the production of these neurotransmitters, and how if we eat only processed foods, we're going to find that we don't feel great, that our body is not provided with what it needs, and that if we try to restrict often, or that we're only focusing on weight loss, we're going to have a little bit of trouble as well trying to figure out, what our body needs emotionally and physically. So these nutrients all function like puzzles, puzzle pieces. When we put everything together, we see the whole picture. And our bodies function like these very well-oiled machines. Of course, we are not machines, we're humans. But at the very basis of biology, it's very much like that. It's from point A to point B to point C, and we need all the little cogs in between. And then filling your plate with these nutrient-dense foods is going to give you what you need, whether that's from animal proteins, plant proteins, or everything in between. Your dietary preferences should be what you're comfortable with and not what anybody else is telling you to eat. And then if you're looking to, ditch the diet and not have to focus on a diet, you're going to want to focus on healthy habits instead. Long-term healthy habits are sustainable, meaning that there's something you can do for the rest of your life, which means that you have nutritional support for the rest of your life, because it's so important to support ourselves for as long as we're here. And remember that food is not just about your physical health. Sometimes it's about your mental health as well. So, everything that we discussed today, we're going to go ahead and put to use. I did create a workbook for you. So, in this workbook, we're going to kind of put everything that we discussed today into the critical thinking mode. I would really love for you guys to fill out this workbook throughout the month and really just reflect on your own dietary habits. There is a small food diary in there, so that's going to take a few days. Be sure to give yourself enough time for that. And then there's also some activities after you do the food diary that are going to help you determine how to support your own mental health through your diet and what changes you might want to make, what long-term healthy habits you might want to make to support your longevity, your mental and physical health. And I've also included a prompted journal, to kind of reflect mostly on the emotional relationship that you have with food. So we're going to be thinking of times that maybe we've dieted, some positive, some negative associations with food, how you feel when that holiday advertising comes around and you're being told to, get your bikini body, your best Christmas body. Reflecting on those relationships with food so that you can see maybe places that you would want to change, what you would want to tell yourself, your younger self, about how to build a healthy relationship with food. So I want to thank you again for, listening to this lecture. I know it was a lot. I probably talked very fast, but I wanted to get everything in. And I just wanted to make sure, that you guys have the basics, as well as a good understanding of how crucial it is to have, a very well-rounded, healthy diet to support, your overall mental health. So thank you again for having me. I will obviously be in the group throughout the month. If you have any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to answer and chat with you. The one thing I can't do is I can't provide individual nutrition instruction, but if you have any questions about, just general nutrition advice that you'd like, I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you. If you're looking for more, kind of healthy, well-rounded recipes, to support your, new nutrition habits, or, something as you go through the workbook throughout the month, I do have an Instagram. It's Ellie_the_healthful_human, and you'll find a lot of free recipes there, as well as some really good resources on things that we need to be discussing in the nutrition community about body positivity and healthy relationships with food. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful January. I'm so excited for 2020. I hope you are as well. And hopefully I'll see you around the chat. All right, bye.